ASEAN countries are pivoting towards sustainable practices. That's in a bid to maintain their global market competitiveness. Now, a fintech company is seeking to transform environmental, social, and governance strategies through its cutting-edge technology. To discuss more about ESG and digital solutions, we have with us the founder and managing director of Stack's ESGpedia, Benjamin So. Hi, Benjamin. Welcome to Market Edge.
Good morning. Hi, Stanley. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's good to have you here. Now, ESG is an increasingly essential initiative, especially for businesses, whether big or small. Tell us first why many businesses and organizations now need to embrace ESG more than ever.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at what's happening in the global landscape, the regulations for mandatory ESG reporting has already kicked off for most countries in Europe and also America. And actually in APAC, you have all the markets like Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, and of course the Philippines implementing mandatory ESG reporting from 2025 onwards. So I think that's where the spillover effect is that, most companies now need to be able to produce such data, produce such reports to the regulators.
Yes, but Benjamin, ESG is easier said than done, especially for smaller businesses. And these days, it's not enough to say one is compliant. Now, government regulations are also keeping up with the growth, and businesses need help, of course, in this aspect. This is where you come in. Tell us about your role here.
Absolutely. So we created ESGpedia because we believe that, every company needs to create their own ESG profile. It's kind of like similar to Wikipedia, right? So if you are a relevant company, you have, done some business, you'll be hoping to be covered in Wikipedia, you have done something great, okay, or something not so good, right? Whatever it is, these will all be data points that are being captured. So similarly, we hope that there will be a form of a service, ESGpedia, whereby it enables companies to get started. So of course, ESGpedia also provides several digital tools for free, even for many companies, so much so that even companies that are only starting for the first time are able to do so easily.
All right. Now, Benjamin, Stack's ESGpedia, of course, is a platform. What can one see in it, and describe to us perhaps the kind of guidance that, businesses and organizations can get when it comes to sustainability reporting now, which is also required as, a lot of businesses progress into ESG initiatives?
Absolutely. First of all, when you look at E and S and G, there are several data points that companies are requesting from their suppliers, right? So, that's why we try to enable the companies to be able to produce the environmental data points, which will, of course, include the GHG or greenhouse gas emissions like carbon. And of course, we also certain social matrices like their employment data, okay, their occupational health and safety, etc., and governance matters. So all of these are compiled into simple format that would be scalable and plug and play to different industry standards and different regulatory requirements. So a company in the Philippines, they will be able to use this data point to satisfy a larger corporate in Philippines, which needs to submit to the SEC a report called the SURE report, sustainability reporting format report. It could also use the same data to convert it to a different kind of a standard report, like the GRI, for example, or an international report from another country to be able to satisfy their other buyers in other markets.
All right. Now, you mentioned the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, will be launching the full sustainability reporting form, the SURE form, if you will. Now, that's going to happen later this year with reporting due for the Philippines, or largely for Philippine businesses in 2025. That's next year. Now, how must businesses prepare for this one?
I think the most important thing is that businesses must start to accept that they need to, make use of the data that they already have. Because I think sometimes people think that ESG is overwhelming, but if you look down to the fundamental root of it, it's largely operational data. How much materials did I procure? How much carbon emission did I emit through my energy consumption or my fuel consumption? Those are operational data that are already available in most companies' procurement or operational or finance databases. So I think that's what we need to do, which is to understand that this is not so difficult, but to have it all put together, okay, in accordance with how the ESG report might look like, to get ready for the future, whereby those data points will become kind of like a financial report. And that's where, hopefully they are able to now embrace these kind of practices, and of course any technology tool that will be able to help.
All right, Benjamin, I'm wondering, aside from, of course, that perception that ESG is difficult, especially for smaller businesses, what do you think are the other obstacles to this initiative, to the activity, to getting more smaller businesses on board?
I think more awareness needs to be done, but I'm very heartened and encouraged by several initiatives or several projects that are now being implemented to enable these smaller companies. I read with great interest that the DTI, Department of Trade and Industry, has already entered into a partnership with Global Reporting Initiative (GRI). Global reporting standard, of course, but to really enable MSMEs in the Philippines, at least 8,000 of them by this year, to be able to get up to speed with the capacity and the knowledge and the skills required, for certain form of reporting that is suitable for the MSMEs. So I think there are several projects and initiatives on the way, both technology-led and, of course, government sector-led, and, of course, led by international organizations to bring more companies ready to the reporting standard.
All right. Are you optimistic of compliance in the Philippines based on your experience with other countries as well that you've worked with? What is the timeline like? And, what are the possible headwinds that this initiative may encounter in the Philippines?
Oh, I'm very optimistic, because if you look at the statistics that's already public, more than 95% of listed companies have already produced sustainability report and submitted it to the SEC as of last year. So that is a very positive sign. Of course, the new regulations are structuring what exactly needs to be reported, but mostly the necessary data points have already been covered through the reports that have been submitted before. And in terms of timeline, Philippines is no different from any other APEC country in the sense that many APEC markets are implementing this in 2025, so no earlier than the Philippines. So which means that, I think that we are in a very advanced situation. I am very heartened, of course, by the policymakers' initiative and desire, and of course the availability of the commitment of so many companies that have already started.
All right, you brought up policy. The SEC is, of course, on board in this. Do you think there is a need for the Philippine government to craft more policies and more directions in terms of, exacting compliance from many businesses on ESG initiatives?
I personally think that, a lot of the compliance could be market-driven, not necessarily by the regulators. I mean, if we start with the listed companies, it's going to look very strange, right? If a certain listed company has less ESG data reported than another listed company. So that's where market forces will take effect. And I think that's where it has already happened in the EU, whereby, consumers and investors are now prioritizing greener companies or companies who are at least more transparent, whether they are green or not so green. So I think that's where market forces will take over, and naturally that forms a form of a deterrent, so much so that, sustainable companies will be profitable, and to be profitable, one has to be sustainable.
And of course, a huge part of this, of course, the success of any ESG initiative or imposing or making sure that, businesses and organizations comply with the requirements is public awareness of ESG, as you were mentioning earlier, this could impact on the way consumers or customers perceive these businesses. So what's happening on the information dissemination front as regards ESG and the public?
Yeah. So I think it's important to really distill ESG to different needs, right? So, I mean, for most retail consumers, we probably do not need to have too much engineering knowledge about nitrogen or carbon. Right. But I think the more important thing is to really have a simple way to understand what's happening to the environment, what's important, to ensure labor rights, for example. So I think that's where different kind of information should be produced for different people. Same with the SMEs, right? So we shouldn't at least expect SMEs to have a full, 100-page sustainability report, but actually still produce enough data that could be possibly able to complete, the supply chain coverage of a larger company, which needs to produce that 100-page data, right? So I think that's where, different people need to learn, have the different type of contextual understanding about E and S and G, and of course this will become more and more established, it's kind of like financial reporting, where there are different kinds of requirements for a mom and pop shop, and of course for a large conglomerate. Yeah.
And as a consumer, do I have access to ESGpedia to find out at least if the businesses I patronize are compliant?
Absolutely. So we have it ready on our website, ESGpedia.io. It has a freemium model, so there are certain information that one can easily find online. Of course, for in-depth analysis, that's usually more applicable for the larger corporates or the financial sector.
All right. There's also a need for Philippine businesses and SMEs in supply chain to leverage digitalisation and easily kickstart their ESG reporting journey. How is this moving along?
So I think the challenge is that, most SMEs may not have digital practices. So, sustainability can be enabled with greater digitalization, of course. So that's where a lot of the, purchases of fuel, purchases of goods could actually be digitalized through a variety of technologies like, uploading documents and having AI to extract those data from documents. Yeah. So I think that's where technology can scale up the rate of adoption, because it's still part of digitalization in general, just that's where we foresee technology will play an important role in doing those heavy lifting, in being able to enable all companies, kind of like how we embrace financial reporting, because we have to, right? To create at least an annual report, no matter how small or big the company is. So it will be the same for ESG reporting. We will be required to produce certain form of information. Again, I repeat that the most of this information would be existing operational data that we have somewhere in our data vault. Okay, that's where we are able to just simply try to digitalize this whole journey to have all this information in the same place.
All right. Lastly, on a related matter, you're partnering with the Philippine Dealing System Holdings Corporation to utilize Tax's ESGpedia platform to support, of course, corporate sustainability and ESG reporting for businesses and issuers in the Philippines. Tell us about this partnership.
Absolutely. So the Philippine Dealing System, or PDTC in the Philippines, they are, of course, the registry and depository of listed companies in terms of debt issuances. So that's where they are able already to receive company filings, company disclosures. And since these companies are the larger corporates, it would make sense for them to utilize the same infrastructure, of course, with certain added functionalities from us to enable them to be able to now produce their ESG report according to the local regulatory standard. So how this impacts the industry in general is that, therefore, these companies are now able to produce their reports according to the format. At the same time, they are also able to use those tools to enable them to capture supply chain emissions, because we are speaking about larger corps, and that's where several smaller companies will now be able to benefit too from this partnership.
All right. Benjamin So, founder and managing director of Tax ESGpedia. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Danny.